if you don't mind if I call you Frank, right? Uh, Frank House from Kentucky did a wonderful teaching on last night about how we really have to take a second look about how we deal with things, how we see things, how we understand things. Because, wow, I mean, we have it all wrong. I mean, have you ever heard in Messianic congregations or home fellowship groups, oh, we need to be in unity. We need to be in unity. And we don't truly understand what it means to. Dr. Snyder talked yesterday about what unity really meant. It meant being in Yahad. Yahad. What is the meaning to be, of Ahad? To be it together. To be of one mind, one heart. I mean, if you go in the books of Acts chapter 2, the Holy Spirit only was able to fall when they were what? In one mind, in one accord, and in one place at one particular time, one specific time. You know, when they were all over the place, the Holy Spirit could not be given. Why? Because this was something that was given from the Messiah to these 11 individuals. And what did Yeshua say? He said, tarry here in Jerusalem until I have given you power from on high. And a lot of ministries today, we have people that are doing things, but they're doing things without receiving power from on high. And so as a result, we have the issues that Frank talked about last night. What was that word again? Exactly. We have we have individuals who don't understand that concept. I know I didn't until last night. I didn't understand it. I've heard of things like that. The word buckets, is that what it is? We're going to learn about that at some point this week. And so I was leaning back in my chair, and as he began to teach, I'm like, wait a minute, I need to pay attention to this. So what we're learning is what? How to be free. I mean, our theme today is up from slavery to freedom. And the best examples of that is our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the 12 sons, how they went into Egypt to join their brother Joseph and his 2 sons. And then how, and you can find this in the book of Yashar, you can find some of this in the Bible, how slavery was not something that happened overnight. It didn't just all of a sudden they woke up, bang, we're slaves. It took time. They came into Egypt as a result of a famine in Canaan. There was restoration, I guess, between Joseph and his brothers. There was a little devious game played by Joseph to kind of get hold of Benjamin and bring him back to town. It's like the rest of the brothers, they going home. Long as I got Benjamin, I'm good. We're cool. We've always been tight. And the rest of them, look, they sold me into slavery. Whatever happens, happens. I'll take care of them from a distance. But at the end of the day, they were restored to one another. And as a result of that restoration, they moved. They moved, they came into Egypt, they began to live there, grow there. And it says in the book of Exodus, chapter 1, at a certain time, these patriarchs died. Joseph died. The Pharaoh that extended benevolence to them, he died. And then there began to be a new Pharaoh, a new administration, even among the children of Israel. And as a result of that, they began to make the slow creep towards slavery. Now, as I said earlier, did it start right away? No. Was it underway? Joshua talks about when Jacob died, he had to get what? Permission from Pharaoh to go back to Canaan to bury Yitzhak, not Yitzhak, but to bury Yaakov. Did he go by himself? And see, you could see the elements then. Did he go by himself? Absolutely not. He did not go by himself. Who did he go with? He went with a great company of soldiers. Now, why was that? If he had favor, he could have just gone with his family, buried him, come back to Egypt. Why did they send such a military expedition to kind of accompany this family and grieve with this family? Because Joseph was not free. The 12 sons were not yet free. They were not free. When they came back and they agreed to come back, to come into Egypt, they no longer were their own property. They were property of who? The king of Egypt at that time. As I said, the administration died on both sides of the issue. A new clan, what I would call tribal leadership raised up in their places. There was a new king of Egypt. There probably was a civil war. And so you ended up with a different type of administration. One that was not friendly towards the people, our forefathers. Why? Because it says in Exodus that they began to fear our forefathers greatly. Why? Because they were prospering in all that they did. They prospered in the fruit of the womb. They prospered in finances. They prospered in land. They prospered everything that they put their hands to, they prospered. Now, where were they not prospering? They were not prospering in the area of unity. When they became part of the Egyptian system, they began to cut their own deal with the Egyptian administration. Somebody might say, because I'm a Levite, I should have more rights because I'm part of the Israelite leadership. And the administration said, yes, let's do that. Why don't we put the Levites over the rest of the 10 tribes to kind of rule them? And we'll rule the children of Israel through the Levites. So when it says that they put taskmasters over them, they began to put overseers over them. Who did they use? They used the Levite class to do that. And so because the Levite class began to do things that the Egyptian, the leadership was no longer Yahweh, but it was the Egyptian king. So they began to carry out the wishes of that king. If you go down, when you bring Moshe on the scene, he sees what's going on. He sees the class warfare that was taking our forefathers into further and further deprivation. They began to beat their fellow servants. They began to extort from their fellow servants. And they began to cry out. But did they cry out in unity during the early days? No, they did not. They cried out in division. This is why that freedom could only come to us when we are united. Going back to Acts chapter 2. When the 120 was up there in the room, and this included Mary. You know, there are a lot of people like to say that Mary is different, but the truth of the matter is Mary had to be up in that room to receive hers just like everybody else. When they became unified, they had power, the Holy Spirit fell, and they were able to go and do their ministry. Our forefathers, until they understood this concept of becoming one mind and one accord, they would always remain slaves. Slaves to the Levites, slaves to the Egyptian administration, and slaves to even self. Moshe and Aaron was tapped to kind of lead our forefathers out of slavery into freedom. And at first they followed the chain of command. What was the chain of command? Go to the elders and say and do these things. Well, how will they know that I have authority to do thus and so? And Yahweh said, I'm going to give you some things that I want you to do. He said, I want you to put your hand in your bosom here. Pull it out. It looked like leprosy. Put it back in. It was healed. What you got there? You got your stick? Use what's in your hands. Throw that stick down. Now, some people say it became a crocodile. Other people say it became a snake. Snake, crocodile, it doesn't matter. Whatever, the point is that whatever the Father was doing, the elders of Israel would know immediately that only Yahweh could do this. Only Yahweh is responsible for this. And only through Yahweh do we know these people to be sent. So they go before the elders, and they tell the elders, look, Yahweh has come to deliver you. And at first, they was excited. They were unified for a moment. And they're like, yes, 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 yes. We're finally going to leave this place. We're finally going to get out of here. But then they were informed that it was not going to happen overnight. There was going to be a process. There was going to be pain. There was going to have to be growth. Why? Because when you are a slave, you are used to what? Being taken care of. You're used to being instructed. You're used to having, you're used to doing what you've been told to do. You don't have to think. You don't have to be responsible. You don't have to do anything. And so they got comfortable with that kind of lifestyle. The Bible says, some people say it was 400 years. Some scholars say that it was 400 and something odd years. One day in slavery is enough for me. There was an old mother during the Selma March in 1965 that sang a song, and it said, before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave, to go home to be with my Jesus. So one day of slavery is enough. These guys did 400. Some did, he did 450 years according to some. One day is enough. The point is that they did this time, and they were conditioned to what? Listen to what they were told and do what they've been told. But just not everybody was conditioned. Why? Because when this first started, there was a prophecy. How many know even the enemy could tell some truth? And the prophecy said that they would be a deliverer that would come up and take these people out of their bondage of the house of Pharaoh. And so the king of Egypt, I think it was Seti, sent forth and slew all of the people, the children of that age. Throw them into the river Nile. Let the alligators and the crocodiles eat them up. Yahweh used the same threat to protect and keep Moshe. Moving back forward to Moshe and Aaron, he's grown. They've just met with the elders of Israel, and they're going before Pharaoh. You say that Yahweh met with us. You need to let us go. And Pharaoh said, what? Why do you keep the people from their work? So he called the Israelite leadership and tell them, we're not going to give you any more straw. To make matters worse, your women and children, they're going to work too. To make matters even worse, now that all of that stuff is done, you're not going to observe Shabbat no more. You're going to do what I tell you to do. And my number is still the same. So I want you to meet this number. And then they had them beaten. And Aaron and Moshe was going in, and they were coming out. They looked at him and say, you. They remember they just had a meeting before where they received the vision of freedom. What's the name of this teaching? Freedom in unity. They looked at him and they said, you are responsible for why this stuff is happening to us. Do you know what you've done? Do you know what you've done? All you had to do is shut up and everything would have gone fine. You have a big mouth. You've made life worse for us. Why don't you go away? But Aaron and Moshe, while they were grieved, they still trusted in the vision of the Father. While the 120 had been grieved earlier, they received a vision from Yeshua, and he told them that if you go stay here in Jerusalem until I give you, till you receive power from on high to go forward in your mission, your ministry, I'm sorry. And they were excited. So they went from grief to having that connection and being reminded, because it says during that 40-day period, when he was with them, when he was teaching them, when he was instructing them, it said he breathed on them. And when he breathed on them, all of the things that he had taught them, all of the things that he had instructed them from the time of his earthly ministry, even unto the time of after the resurrection, it came to mind. And they were put in mind of everything. They received understanding of the vision that he was imparting to his Talmudim. Flip backwards to our forefathers. They had not yet received that vision. They had not yet received that instruction. Why? Because right now, at the point that the leadership had been beaten and humiliated, the leadership had also confronted Moshe and Aaron and said, you are responsible for why I just got a beating. Why don't you just go away and leave me alone? They get back to Goshen that night, and there was grief all over the camp, and we would see this same vision repeat itself from freedom all the way until the last one of them died at the foot of the promised land. Why did they die? Well, Paul talks about it. He talks about how many of them passed through they were baptized, they passed under the cloud, they walked in the river and was baptized. But with many of them, he was not pleased. Why? Because they never understood what it meant to be free. And because they never understood what it meant to be free, they were never able to unify and be a true part of Klal Israel. They heard Yahweh come down and speak to them. They became so afraid that they said, no, we can't handle this. We can't handle this. We can't do this. Moshe, you go up there and you speak with him, because if we speak to him, we will die. And Yahweh said, right there, he said. And this is how much he loves us. So he said, oh, if they had a heart to follow me. Let's go back to that scene outside the general court of Pharaoh. Moshe and Aaron still persisted, and they walked forward in their vision. They went before Pharaoh again. And they said, let Yahweh's people go. And Pharaoh sitting there on his kisei, and his arrogance, he said, look, all of this stuff is mine. You are mine. The people of Israel are mine. Everything they have is mine. I provide them food. I provide them clothing. I decide when they observe Sabbath. Keep in mind, he said in the beginning, you have too much time on your hands. So we're going to take the Shabbat away. You could work on that. Go out there and find the straw. Now, let's see you think about becoming free now. And they were disunified. They began to argue with one another. They began to argue with the leadership. Began to argue with Moshe and Aaron. And at one point, it was like, stone them, stone them. We go on through the series of plagues. Animal disease, lice, darkness, hail, even death of the firstborn. Finally, Egypt gets it, and they said, listen, we got to get these people out of here. They're going to ruin us. Pharaoh, look here. Let these people go. And so Pharaoh, in his grief, lets the people go. Question becomes, are they unified? Absolutely not. Why? While they may have received favor from Yahweh, while they may have received authority from Yahweh to do what they did as far as plundering the Egyptians, as far as crossing the Red Sea, in here they were not unified. Up here they were not unified. Why? Because at the end of the day, they were still just slaves. They'd not stopped dancing with the devil and switched over to a new partner, Messiah. They go through the process in the wilderness. And see, our forefathers was an idol-ridden people. You talk to rabbinic Jews today, and they'll tell you that the reason for the first destruction of the first temple was idol worship. They'll tell you also that the reason for the destruction of the second temple was baseless hatred. And they're right about how right they were and how right they are, because they still say it. I have rabbi friends of mine that'll tell you that. But what was the real issue? The real issue is that they were still slaves to religion. They were slaves to man-made tradition. They were slaves to the enemy. Why? Because they never stopped. And do you ever wonder why Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't able to go into the promised land? And I think, and this is just my opinion here, I think it was because they had began the process of setting Moshe up as an idol. What's my proof? Every time that there was an incident, what did they do? Moshe, you provide us water. You provide us this. You do this. You do that. They never were able to esteem Yahweh in all of his glory and majesty and sovereignty. It was always who they could see. Now, here's the crazy part about that. They saw Yahweh. They heard Yahweh. They saw the magnificent miracles that the Father did in all their travels during that 40 years. Even after they had made the golden calf, even after they had the rebellion of Korah, even after they whined, kvetched, moaned all the time, we want meat. Oh, we want meat. I'm gonna just die if I don't have any meat. And so what did Moshe tell them? You shall, because Yahweh heard it. You shall have meat. You're gonna have so much meat, it's gonna be coming out of your ears. And what was it about? The lust of slavery. They desired to be slaves. Many times they talked about the leeks. Many times they talked about the different vegetables that they had by the cooking pots of Egypt. Now, do you believe that? I don't. They had no such thing. Why? They was too busy working. It was all they could do at the end of the day to make ends meet. But they preferred, through their actions, slavery rather than freedom. Freedom, in order to be free, you have to be unified. In order to be free, you have to take responsibility. We're going to talk about that later on this week. The freedom of responsibility. They were not willing to do these things. They were content to be told what to do by the leadership, by Moses, or anybody else. Plug in whoever you want to plug in. The Egyptian administration. Plug in the Levites. Plug in a monarchy. It all came down to the lack of unity. We see it today, don't we? Many of our Messianic congregations, we're here in East Tennessee, which is what I would like to call a Mecca for Messianic congregations right here. We have several large congregations. Tony Robinson is here. Steve Bergson is here. Eric McCurl is here. Chris and Margaret Jordan, they're here. We're here. The Seventh-day Adventists are here. Worldwide is here. Well, actually not Worldwide, it's United now, right? United is here. Global is here. Church of God Seventh Day is here. It's loaded with all these Seventh-day believer types. In the Messianic community, it's flooded. You want to be a Messianic? East Tennessee is where it is. It's where it's at. Here's the problem with that. They lack effectiveness. Why? Because of their doctrines, because of their beliefs, because of even their structures, they cannot unify to be a formative force in this town. Do you know that they can take over Chattanooga and Cleveland? If we put our mind to it, we can chase the Cleveland Assembly right out of here. That's not going to happen. Why? One, I believe that there is going to be a confrontation in Cleveland, Tennessee, between the Torah and lawlessness. Lawlessness means, I had a Cleveland Assembly pastor that we, Governor and I, become friends with. His mom lives in our building. She's a sweet sister. And she would come and ask us questions. And one day she asked us about the Nachash, right, Gov? About the snake. And we were able to tell her that it was a Nachash. I said, be careful, it's a Nachash. And we use Hebrew terms to get her to understand that what she's seeing is Hebrew. She's got a grandboy That when I was talking that day, we were talking about the Torah. We were talking about how you're supposed to eat, how God never told us, and I use that term because we have people that may not understand what I'm talking about here, but God never told us in Leviticus chapter 11 that it was permissible to eat things that he did not consider food. But yet my brother pastor that was sitting on my couch that day with his family and our neighbor, I mean, it's like an invasion over there in Cleveland. But we've made up in our mind, Governor and I made up in our mind, we are going to love these people where they are and let them see our example. Let them see that we don't eat like the nations. We don't study like the nations. We don't act like the nations. We don't walk like the nations. Why? Because there is freedom in unity. Now, if these bodies of believers, Steve Bergson and all these other people, if they will unify under the flag of Yahweh, not the flag of their own kingdoms that they're building, but if they'll unify under the flag of Yahweh, they can take over these people. They could run the Adventist University right to its knees. They can run the Cleveland Assembly. We can bring it to its knees. I had a Cleveland Assembly pastor when I first moved into Cleveland. He happened to meet us at the, what was it, Gov? The Dennis. And he began to speak into our lives. And one of the things he told me, he talked about ancient authorities that's in this area. He was speaking directly to me, and he said, your desire is to take on the apparatus up front and bring it down. He said, but you're not going to do that because it's going to kill you. He said, you have to do like they did at Jericho. What did they do at Jericho? One day they came and they marched around. They went back to their camp. The next day that they marched around, keep in mind that they were unified at this point in spirit. They went back to their camp. They came the other day, marched around, went back to the camp. But on the last day, what happened? They marched around not one time, not two times, but how many times? 7. And at the last time, they faced the wall. And what did Joshua say? Shout! Shout to Yahweh! And they blew the shofar, and the ground began to tremble, and it brought the walls down. And then every man, that's according to Joshua chapter 1, went straight up. I think it's not Joshua chapter 1. I think it's chapter 5 or 6. And they went in and they conquered the city. But why? Because at that moment they were unified of purpose. And so that man told me that. And so I've received my clear instructions from the Almighty. And I believe that Yahweh can use an ass if he wants to. He can use anybody he chooses to use. He can use a Cleveland Assembly pastor. He can use an Adventist pastor. He can use whatever he wants to use to speak to you. And so I received that word. And so the way I do business now in Cleveland, I go about my day and I run into these different people, and we love them where they are. We form a relationship because we're going to need those relationships later on. Unified. The freedom of unity. Our forefathers didn't get that point. They tempted Yahweh. They gave Yahweh all kind of trouble out there. Started with whining over water. Then they went and they made a golden calf. Yahweh had to do something, and in there, as he was trying to teach them, as he was trying to disciple them as to what it was to be free. That's what that 40 years was all about. What it is to be free, what it is to be a nation. He was trying to teach them that, listen, you have responsibilities now. For example, let's take the manna. What was the manna really about? The manna was really about teaching a work ethic and teaching Shabbat. That's what it was all about. How do we know? Because we know that Israel had cattle. Don't you think if they had all that cattle that they just plundered from the Egyptians? Keep in mind, when they came into Egypt, they brought property. And through all of this, through the, the last administration and the administration that they were currently serving under, they were allowed to keep their property. And also when they plundered the Egyptians, what? They ended up with their property and more. So they were able to eat. They were able to do these things. But what was it really about? I'm trying to teach you responsibility. It's almost like when you're raising a child. You teach her how to eat. You teach her how to dress. You teach her how to act. You teach it social norms and customs. Frank talked about that last night. Some things are learned. Some things are innate. But your child is receiving instruction. And there are certain stages of the person's life where instruction, there's more instruction to be done. So we see that pattern that Frank was talking about. That's what was going on in the discipleship process of our forefathers. There came a point, though, where Yahweh said what? He told them, go take the land. They said, okay, we got our own way we want to do this. They went up and they spied out the land. They came back and they brought the children of Israel an evil report. The evil report was, oh my goodness, we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. We can't do this. They looked like, we saw the Anakins there. We saw everybody there. I was reading yesterday in my study about how they took on, during David's time, how, yes, David killed Goliath, and David killed another giant, and David's servants also killed some giants. You also know that Yahweh gave the children of Esau the ability to kill off a whole breed of giants. So we know that beating a giant can be done. They knew this in their history. Of course, they hadn't gotten to David, but they knew the history that giants can be defeated. I mean, you look at those grapes. You think those things wasn't GMO? Those were some big grapes. They had to put a stick and carry them over their shoulders. That's how big they were. Talk about the original GMO. But they came back and they brought like a roach to a roach nest or a rat to a rat's nest. They brought that poison, that evil report back to their people, their brothers and their sisters. And as a result, they say in the camp that night, it was a whole bunch of, we're going to die. Yahweh has brought us out here to kill us in the wilderness. Who said that before? Just before they crossed the sea of reeds. The devil said the same thing to Pharaoh and his advisors. They done got stuck out there and they lost and they don't know what they're doing. And those fools out there, they let them out there to get killed. Pharaoh got brave. Assemble my chariots. I'm fixing them. Fix them. I'm going to bring these people back and we're going to make them serve. We're going to make them serve with more rigor. And they charge that out there after they have their little, you ever see these political rallies that they have? And that's what it was. It was a political rally. Somebody gave him the report. He had a rally and then everybody jumped on the chariots and yeah, we're going to go and kill him. And so they charged after him. But what happened? At the end of the day, Yahweh fought that battle. And he drowned them all in the sea. A lot of people think that Pharaoh died that day. No. Pharaoh and his people didn't die in the sea. Yahweh needed a what? Witness to his greatness. He needed a witness to his sovereignty, a witness that, look, these are my people. Israel is my son. So no, I don't think Pharaoh died. I think he might have been overthrown later on, but I don't think he died. Because that's not like Yahweh's character. Yahweh needs a witness. And so here we are. We have these people that in the dark of the night, and it got so bad they wanted to stone Moses and Aaron. Again, they wanted to stone the very idols that they were trying to set up. You brought us out here. You got us in this situation. You take care of it. You fix it. But they never esteemed Yahweh, and Yahweh said, I've had enough. That's it. I'm sick of them. Moses said, what you gonna tell your people? Notice how whenever Israel got in trouble, you brought these people out of here, you talk to them. Because if I talk to them, I'm gonna burn them up. Here's what you tell them. Everyone from the age of 20 years old and above will die. I think it's 20 to 50. Right here in this wilderness. You want to be a slave? You're going to be buried in your grave. Right out here in the wilderness. The only two people that's going to survive out of this group, notice, see, if I was Moses, I would have been saying, hold on, wait a minute, slow your roll. Slow your roll. You called these two people out, Joshua and Caleb. But that was supposed to happen with me. What's supposed to happen with Aaron? Yahweh said, these two people are going to go into the promised land. Why? Because they have a different spirit. They have a different way of understanding. And they are in Ahad. We talked yesterday about what Yahad meant. Yahad is unified one each other. Ahad, unified with the Father. That spirit connected with that of the Father. And because of that connection, they were allowed to go in. And they were going to be the ones that were going to be teaching the freedom of unity to the next generation. They died because they were never able to get with the unity program, the discipleship program. See, discipleship brings about unity. You know why there's so much disunity in the body right now? Because there's really no discipleship. And if there is discipleship, who are we discipling people to? We're discipling people to men. We're discipling people to man-made kingdoms. Who should we as leaders always be pointing to? We should always be pointing to Yahweh, Yeshua, the Ruach HaKodesh. If you see somebody saying, look at me, let me teach you, let me do this, let me do that, run. Because that's not the discipleship program that you should be a part of. Anything that points away from Yeshua, run. The 12 in the book of Acts, and who we are emulating in these days, always pointed to Yeshua, their master. The servant is never greater than his master. He might achieve more than his master, but he's never greater than his master. We are never to be greater than Yeshua, and unfortunately, in the Messianic and in Hebraic roots and the independent Messianic movement, everybody is trying to be God, a God. They're building their own kingdoms, but they're not building the kingdom of the Almighty. See, we are Avadim, and we are Avadim to one person, and that is Yeshua. Why? Because we were bought with a price. That price requires that there be unity among the brethren. Now, did all those disciples get along? They argued all the time, but at the end of the day, what was their goal? Yeshua and him crucified. That's what should be our goal. Yes, we agree, and yes, we disagree in the Yahad over things. But what's the important thing? Yeshua and him crucified. And if we can't get with that program, then this may not be the place for us. That's the unifier. The freedom of unity only comes when we realize that we are in Ahad with Yeshua. Basar Ahad. We are one flesh with Messiah. Just the way Adam and Eve became what? One flesh. That is the example. We should seek to be one flesh with Messiah. See, we are the legal body, even though we are all different shades with different sizes. Some of us are more plump than others. We have different characteristics. We were given these characteristics, different shades, different sizes, different ways of thinking. Why? Because we are the legal body of Messiah in the earth. Just like when Yeshua went back, the 12 became the legal body of Messiah in the earth. Their job was to teach Talmudim. The people that they taught, their next responsibility was to teach another group of people. And so on and so forth until we got here. We have to pick up the mantle and teach people, disciple people. Now, do we disciple them to ourselves? Absolutely not. I just said that earlier. We are to always point to Yeshua. That's our job. Point people to Yeshua. Yeshua will take care of the work. Yes. I like this, Frank, that you talked about. I meditated on that last night. Somebody comes to you, can I work on Shabbat? My inclination is to say, no, you can't work on Shabbat. You know that. Well, what's the proper way to say it, Governor? What's the proper way to address that?
That's between you and God, you and Yahweh.
Mm-hmm.
You have to learn for yourself to have a relationship with the Father.
And also, here is what I would do.
A suggestion or advice. I'm sorry.
Exactly. And you keep it moving. So this is what, go mute if you will. So this is what helps us to unify by understanding there are different ways to point to Yahweh, different ways to point to Yeshua. Understand those ways and get there. You know, you look around you, and if you see all of this disturbance, this distraction, this disturbance, this distraction, this disunity is not going to get better, folks, until we understand this concept. If we continue to establish our own kingdoms and our own man-made traditions and our own ways of understanding, we will always be disunified. We will always be broken. People will always be in the bed with the covers over their head, with the windows pulled down, depressed. People will always be lawless because they're wise in their own eyes and in their own conceit. Until we change the way we do this stuff, we will always be slaves to institutions, to ourselves, and to even to the enemy. Amen? Amen. Thank you very much. Okay, let's see.